Badgers basketball talk. We're going to talk about what's next. Pieces coming back. What does this team need to add to the roster? Could you start Amos and Winter together next year? All that and more. Plus, was a season of success with Coach Gier, and just reflecting on John Tanje and that brutal BYU loss on Wisconsin. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode, we are breaking down what comes next with this team. What do they need to add to this roster with the pieces that are leaving? Was the season a success? March struggles with Coach Gier, plus reflecting on John Tanje in that game. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And you may see it on my screen back there, but Wisconsin women's hockey has won the national title. We talked about it a little bit, I think, already, but 4-3 overtime game against Ohio State. An incredible game for the women. Heck yeah, let's go. All right, let's bring Coach Gier in. Let's talk about this, man. What comes next? So we're definitely getting into this game, but there's been a ton of shows and conversations breaking this down. Pieces leaving. You have Tanje gone, Crowell gone, Klesman gone, McGee gone, Gilmore, Ilver, Cameron Hunter has entered the portal. We talked about him briefly coming into this year. We're going to make some assumptions here, okay? But we're going to assume that these pieces are back. And again, we don't know that for sure. You never know. But Nolan Winter, Blackwell, Janicki, and Amos are kind of your key returning pieces. And in that freshman class last year, you have Greppy, Freitag, and Robeson. What comes next for this team? What do they got to do now?
What comes next is they got a lot of work to do, especially in today's day and age. I hate to say it, but they're going to have to be heavy into the portal because you're talking about replacing Tanje 32 minutes, Stephen Crowell 26 minutes, Max 28 minutes. And then, Kamari off the bench around 20 minutes. And not to mention just the production, Tanje, 20 points a game, Max 10 points a game, Kamari, 7 points a game. And Stephen Crowell, I mean, you're basically losing a double-double on occasions. So that you're losing quite a bit. So they have a lot of work ahead of them, especially if they want to stay in that upper echelon of the Big Ten.
Let me ask you this. I want to start here. And we talked about this before the show, but a lot of people have said, well, what if we shift Amos into that starting 4 spot? You move Nolan over to the 5. You concentrate on the portal. You get a point guard. Obviously, you still need help, but we kind of had the same thought. I think that's too light. I don't think you're physical enough if you have Amos at the 4 and Nolan Winter at the 5.
I agree with you on that. I just think not that Amos and Winter can't hold down that 4 and 5 spot, but to your point, Ryan, I just think they're too light, especially from a physicality standpoint. And we all know the rigors of the Big Ten season, and if you're talking about banging with the Purdue's and the Michigan States, the Michigans, with 2 7-footers and stuff like that, I just don't know if you can maintain a spot in the top upper half of the Big Ten with, Amos being at your 4 and Winter being at your 5, just not necessarily from a height standpoint, but like you said, from just a weight, like just too light. I just don't think, I'm not sure you have enough physicality to get through the rigors of a Big Ten season.
So you think, and I think we're on the same page here, they need to get a physical 5.
Me, ideally, in my opinion, I would think you put Nolan Winter at a 4 with his versatility and his skill set and stuff. I think he's a huge mismatch at the 4. And if you can pair him with a bona fide 5-man, I just think teams have to adjust to you because of the versatility of Winter. Not to say, and you can move Winter down to the 5 and bring Amos in at the 4 or whatever. I just think from a skill standpoint and a versatility, if you can slot Winter into that 4 and bring in another 5, I just think it brings you more depth, more versatility, and you can play a lot of different combinations of lineups with him at the 4, as opposed to him just being your 5-man.
I think one of the things, and I agree with you there with Nolan at the 4. I think one of the things that is going to be hard to replace from Corral is a lot of what he did made this offense go with his ability to pass out of the post. The teams would double him and he would kick it out, or he'd be able to score in one-on-one coverage. What's the hardest part to replace with Stephen Corral? Is it the passing ability from the pivot?
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the passing ability and the skill set from him. But I think more than anything is just the consistency and the reliability that he brought. I mean, for 4 years, he was a starter. Right? I'm not sure and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but I'm not sure. Did he miss any games for injury? Or, I mean, that's what people, I know there's been some criticism of Stephen Crown and stuff, but people don't understand. It's really hard to find size, period, in college basketball, but to find reliable, accountable, just really good basketball players that Crowell has been his whole career. And like you said, a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, 10 points a game, 5.5 boards a game, and just being there every day, day in, day out, practicing games like that. It's so valuable. And I don't think people appreciate it. That is so hard to find a reliable big man that's never hurt, shows up in the lineup every day. And let's not forget too that Stephen Crowell is a great human being, a great person. He represents the program and the university in the highest regard. I mean, he is a coach's dream in every facet, on and off the court. And I just, it's hard to replace good people and good players like that.
Yeah, good culture fits. That was part of the strength of this team, was that culture. So I agree. We need a 5. Let's get to the other spots. So let's say you slot Blackwell in at the 2, you slot Winter in at the 4. We picked up a physical 5 in the portal. Do you need 2 more transfers? I think you and I both agree you need a guard. You need a point guard to come in and run this and ideally shift Blackwell off ball. I think that's a better fit for him. Can Janicki be your starting 3, or do you need 3 starters in the portal?
I think if you want to be, a top 20, top 15 program, I think you need to bring in 3 starters. I don't want to take away from Amos and Janicki. Like, I think they're valuable pieces. I think they're really good players. But again, if as a staff, you always want to recruit better than what you have. I'm not saying the Badgers can't be successful with those guys, and I don't want to undersell those guys, and they get every opportunity. They get the first crack at a starting lineup. I just think if the ultimate goal is to try to win championships, a Big Ten championship, I think you always need to recruit over what you have. And I just think if you can go get 3 guys, because like we talked about, I agree with you, Ryan. I think you need a 5. I think you need a starting point guard. And then I think I agree you slide Blackwell is more suited for that two scorer combo type. And then I think you slot in, you got to replace a Tonje, a scorer, and preferably a scorer that can shoot it really well, because we talked about one of their improvements this year and why they were so hard to guard is having more shooters on the floor. Their spacing was so much better. So, I think you got to go find a scorer to replace Tanje, and that particularly hope that scorer is a mid to high 33-point shooter on top of that. And then, because like we talked about, you're losing a lot of production. And I think, to your point, I think you need to go find 3 starters.
Yeah, I kind of wonder too if I think some of that scoring from Tanje, I hope is going to get picked up by another step from Winter and another step from Blackwell. I think some of that's there. It's really hard to replace a Tanje because it was really hard to find a Tanje in the first place. But you're right. There's a big scoring punch that's gone. I think some of those returning guys will replace some of that, I hope. And then I wonder if at that 3 spot, if you can find a point of attack defender, like a really good 3-and-D guy, not going to replace the scoring to Tanje. And that's a concern to your point. Maybe you're not as potent offensively, but maybe you're a little better defensively with they just don't have they didn't have an athlete on the perimeter this year that could really lock somebody up. And I wonder if maybe that's where they go with that 3 spot.
It's a really good thought, and it's a good need from you to point out. I do agree that they could get an athlete or a defensive stopper where you just know if you need somebody that's gonna lock down the opponent's best player, like a Richardson or a Donaldson or something, where if you could get a guy that can get you a bucket, but hey, when we're playing the opponents, that top guy in that scouting report, this is our guy. This is our guy. This is our defensive stopper. We know he's going to take out he's going to guard the other team's best player. And to your point, and let's not forget though, whether that 3 position we're talking about here, we also have to find somebody. They got to find somebody to replace the production and the ability of Klesman as well. So again, you're talking about you're losing a lot of pieces between Klesman, Corral, Tonje. That's a lot of production that unfortunately the Badgers need to replace.
Yeah, and let's also be fair and point this out. You mentioned it's hard to find size. It's hard to find really good 3-and-D guys because every team needs them in college basketball and in pro basketball. So that's also not an easy thing to find. All right, we're going to take a quick second here, come back, and I want Coach's perspective on this. What is a successful season? Was this a successful season? How difficult is it to advance in March? Big picture perspective coming up next on Locked On Badgers from Coach. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at 5 Hour Energy. Listen, if you're like me, sometimes daylight savings sneaks up on you a little bit, and you need a little bit more energy. You need a little bit of boost. You're feeling a little bit of that loss of sleep. 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but listen, it also means more work sometimes. I was outside today working in the lawn, moving some stuff, getting the spring stuff started to knock out. I needed a 5 Hour Energy to kind of push through it. Had a couple shows to do today. 5 Hour Energy is there for me to get through my busy day, whether I'm watching March Madness or knocking out yard work or just being a dad to 2 kids who beat on me all day long. Right now, head over to 5hourenergy.com. Find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach, mango. You can even build your own 12 or 24 packs delivered right to your door. If you need one now, go grab a 5 Hour Energy at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Okay, let's jump back into this with Coach Gottlieb. As always, excuse me, really appreciative of his time. Big picture question here, and I think this is going to be fascinating from your perspective because you're in this game, you're in this business, you coach. Was this a successful season?
Yeah, Ryan, that's an intriguing question. I was locked in last night with you guys on the live reaction show, and it was a really good debate, not only with you and Rajiv, but the audience and the listeners. There was a wide range of opinions, and like you said, fans have every right to their own opinion stuff. Me personally, I think it was a successful season. Yeah, we've had this debate over the last 4 to 6 weeks. What was this team's ceiling? Me personally thought this team's ceiling was a Sweet 16, just because I think in my eyes was the defensive limitations. So I thought that was their ceiling. So they just, in my opinion, they just fell short of that ceiling. So I would give it a B+. And the reason I would give it a B+ as opposed to an A- is I think if they would have won the Big Ten championship game, I think then you're talking A-A, because a championship is a championship. Championship lasts forever. But, and I get why people would think, not going to a Sweet 16 for the eighth season in a row, why they would not believe it's a successful season. But I just think if you factor in everything that the Badgers went through this year, for the simple fact they were predicted to finish 12th in the Big Ten, and Storr left, and there was questions about what direction the program was heading. To have the year that they had, and basically be a possession short of the Sweet 16 and playing in a Big Ten championship game, and earning the 5th seed in the Big Ten tournament. To me, as my perspective as a coach and the staff, I think they should be really proud of the season that they put forth this year and what they all accomplished. Yeah, was it disappointing that they didn't make it to the next weekend? Absolutely, but I would be hard to not call it a successful season in my eyes.
Yeah, and I certainly have been on the show enough to say I agree with that. And let's zoom out a little bit and just look at Wisconsin. The football coaching transition hasn't gone particularly well. There's no way Chris McIntosh is touching the basketball coaching job when your coach is a 5 seed, then a 3 seed, not embarrassing the program. Like, you're not touching that until football starts getting better. Do you even come close to remotely thinking about a change there? So Greg Gard is absolutely not on the hot seat. I think it was a successful season, but a counterpoint I made, and I'm curious on your take here. If you don't get past the round of 32 with a John Tonje, who was a second team All-American, and 4 fifth-year seniors, and a couple really, I think it's 4, counting the bench guys, a couple young players in Winter and Blackwell that have a lot of promise, culture guys, it felt like this was the year to get past that. And if you don't with this group, it's hard to envision another team like this.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I would counter that to the fact is, and I think you alluded to this last night, there's 364 teams in Division I men's basketball. To get to a Sweet 16, you're talking that's 16 out of 364. I'm a basketball coach, not a mathematician, but I don't know what the percentage is on that. But you're talking a very low percentage of teams get that opportunity to play that second weekend in the tournament. But to your point, if you didn't take advantage of that when you have an epic season and an epic performance last night by Tanje, and you had the veterans coming back, and they had the other thing, don't discount at all, they had good health for the most part. I know Max missed some games and stuff, but they didn't lose any starters to season-ending injury and stuff. They had a lot of good luck and a lot of good fortune. If not this year, to your point, Ryan, when? And that's a legitimate question that I do not have a good rebuttal for.
How many years? So here's an interesting question. I thought of this while we were talking, and I don't really know the right answer to this. So Greg Gard, Wisconsin hasn't gotten past into the Sweet 16 for 8 years, right? Is there a number that becomes unacceptable? Let's say you continue to stack good regular seasons, you continue to be a 3 seed, a 5 seed, a 6 seed, relatively successful years that a lot of programs would take, but you continue to not push deep into March. Is there a year amount where eventually someone says, no, this is enough?
That's a legitimate question. I guess I would say a more obvious answer to it is, though, where do the Badgers and the program stand in today's realm of NIL?
It's not in the top 16, I'll tell you that. If you're talking Sweet 16, Wisconsin's not in the Sweet 16 of NIL.
And I get the fans' frustration. I completely get what you're saying. Me as being a lifelong Badger fan too. I mean, I didn't sleep last night. I'm frustrated as well, but the game is so different now, and it's so much now about just dollars and cents. So, it's just really hard to put that kind of ceiling or expectations on Coach Gar and the staff. If you're, to your point, Ryan, if you're not top 16 in NIL, is that a legitimate goal or standard to hold against the coaching staff? And I know everybody's going to say, well, you should develop your players and you should coach them up and you should get them better. And I'm not saying that. And I think Gard and his staff do an incredible job with player development, and what Gard's done and his staff has done in the past couple of years on identifying players like John Tanje in the portal and Store and such like that. They've done a tremendous job. But unfortunately, in the current climate of today's game, it's not necessarily how good of the coaching staff or player development program you have or resources or facilities. Unfortunately, right now, it's how big is your bag.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, man. And I mean, I think there's a narrative out there that says, well, if you win more, get to the Sweet 16, people get more excited. I think that's to some degree true too. Like, I think you can make your own luck to some degree, but you're still not going to outspend a Kansas. You're still not going to outspend a UConn. You're still not going to outspend a whole bunch of schools. Like, I lived in New England. UConn will spend some money. Like, they're not alone in that. You're still not going to outspend those teams. If Greg Gard got to the Sweet 16, Wisconsin is not suddenly a top 10 NIL program. That's not how this is going to work here. So
no, and you took the words out of my mouth. You brought up Kansas. I was thinking Kansas number one, and then number two. Don't forget, Indiana spent. It's been reported they spent $3 million on their team this year, and they didn't even make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're privy to the information, but I'm certainly not. I don't know what the Badgers spent or what they have in NIL, but I would be very surprised to hear if it's anywhere close to $2 or $3 million that Kansas and UConn and Indiana are spending. And to your point, those teams aren't in the tournament, and one of them didn't even make the tournament. So again, from a fan's perspective, I get the frustration and the expectations, but is it fair to hold Coach Gar or his staff or any program to those standards if they aren't in that financial situation with the teams that they're competing against to try to get to the Sweet 16?
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to it was a Utah State podcaster talk the other day. I forget what podcast I was even on, but he was laughing and poking fun at schools like Wisconsin that would complain about the NIL bag that certain schools had. He said, "You think you have it bad? Try being a group of four, or like, and like there's coaches at all sorts of levels, and I mean, you certainly have experience in the coaching world that would say, yeah, you guys are all right. Last cycle, you bought an Amos, a Tonje, you were able to retain a Winter, like you guys are okay. Make do with more, or make do with what you have." But it does really highlight the disparity in college sports in a way that it never has fully looked so separated, right? Like it really shines a light on how this is not a level playing field, and it's not even close.
Yeah, and it's sad. And, I hate to say it. It's sad that that's today's realm, and what we're talking about. Basing expectations on the size of your bank account. It just doesn't seem right. But I think unfortunately it's today's reality. And I think when you talk about whether a program or a season successful, I think that's got to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we're going to take a quick second there, come back, talk about the legacy of John Tanje. Just how incredible was he this year? And any last thoughts from that BYU game? That's coming up next with Coach Gothier. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show. As always, a quick second to say thank you as well. Today's episode brought to you by our great friends over at Game Time. I've talked about Game Time a lot because they've been a partner of this program and this network for a long time. But it is better to watch games in person with your own eyes, be there in the environment, feel the excitement, be there with your fellow fans, the community. We do Locked On events at least a couple times a year where we get people together to watch games. There's nothing like it. Well, last Locked On event we had, multiple people in that group had never been to a game in the Kohl Center, and it was so cool to experience that. It would have been cooler if we could have inbounded the ball against Oregon and won the game. Not that I'm still a little salty about that. It is what it is. That we probably don't get a 3 seed in Denver if we beat Oregon. I'll just say that. But Game Time can help you get those places, get those tickets. And there's great ticket curation of concerts, theater. There's all sorts of events you can go. Game Time right now. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, let's jump back into this with Coach Gothier. Wrap it up. As always, really grateful for his time. Coach, we were talking today. I was talking with Justin Rajiv a little bit about John Tanje and the idea that next year, first of all, it's as a fan, it's sad. You get a Tanje for a year. He's my kid's favorite player, and now he's gone, right? Like, it's sad to have a guy like that leave in 1 year. He's an anomaly. Like, not only are you not going to find a guy like Tanje in the portal very easily, a guy who can score at that level, but he's a transfer guy that bought into the culture, who didn't self-promote, who really became a part of this team and this team's dynamic. How do you, A, put his season in perspective, and then B, how do you replace this guy?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm feeling your son's pain as well, because the first thing I texted you last night after the game, I said, I'm sad.
Yeah.
I'm sad because we don't get to watch John Tanje anymore. I'm sad because he had an epic game and the season's over. I mean, if you think about, just to put perspective, Tanje's season, what's the ultimate elite thing of a basketball player? They talk about the 50-40-90. So for fans that might not nerd out into this as much, what that means is 50% from the field, 40% from three, 90% from the free throw line. John Tanje went 47% from the field, 39% from three, and 90% from the free throw line. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. And the best part about it, Ryan, I think, and you've done a really great job of this, and so has other people that work every day and cover the Badgers, but Tanje is a team first guy. He didn't put up those numbers because he's jacking shots or taking bad shots. Like any interview and you talk to any of his teammates, they all talked about how humble the guy, had no ego. He always talked about the team. Last night, his press conference after the game, he talked about how painful it is that he's not going to be in a Badger, and he talked about his teammates. He never talked about himself. He never made it about him. And I thought AJ Storr is a really good player for the Badgers. He had an incredible year. But let's be honest, there's a reason why AJ Storr has been at 8 schools in 8 years, because it's about AJ Storr. And I think John Tanje is the ultimate athlete in what he represented, what he meant to the Badgers and the program, and how he represented the program. And just those numbers alone, what he put up and the success, like the Badgers took on the personality of Tanje and the group as a whole. They talked about how close they were as a team, how much fun they had playing together. I read some comments from Coach Gard. He talked about it might have been the most fun he's ever had in his career coaching, because the guys showed up every day and they all wanted to be there, and it was about the team and about Wisconsin, and there wasn't any of that other BS going on. I mean, and I give Klesmit and Gilly and Crowell, all those guys deserve credit. But I think they all kind of took on the personality of Tanje. And you and I kind of talked at halftime last night. That game was teetering where we thought maybe the Badgers were just going to kind of get blown out and go away. And Tanje, he never had that mentality. And he just kept on talking about – he talked about next play, we got this, we stay in it. And I just think the whole team adopted that attitude. And that's how they played the season. And it's just, I'm with your son. I'm just sad. We only got 1 year of Tanje, because I think not only was he a special player, but he was a special person, and he did everything the right way, and he represented the University of Wisconsin in the highest regard that he possibly could.
Man, that is really well said. Yes. Everything you said there. Yes. Yeah, that's really, really well said, man. And you go back to that game he had against BYU, and in my brain immediately went to, is this one of the greatest single game efforts I've ever seen from a Badger, right? And I'd have to actually look, right? But my Rolodex went back to Johnny Davis against Jaden Ivey in Purdue when he had 37 points, I think it was. It went back to, if you remember, Jordan Taylor when he had that OSU game, and he went just nuclear. It went back to Decker against Arizona, I think in the Elite Eight. But like, he's right there. That's one of the single most dominant performances on a big stage I've seen from a Badger basketball player.
And what's crazy about Ryan too is we talked about it last night at halftime and stuff. He did not play. He did not have a good first half.
Right.
I don't think he made a three. Right. He was like 0 for 4 from 3. And he kept himself in the Badgers within striking distance because he was able to get to the foul line, which he did a great job all year. But I don't remember what his point total was in the first half. I think it was around 10 or 8 to 10. But again, he didn't make a perimeter shot. Like, he did not play like what you would classify as well for him in the first half. And here you and I are sitting here talking about an epic performance. And like you said, I would have to go back in history and see what other performances matched up to that. And he literally did that in a half that they were down 11 points, and they had a shot at the end of the game to win the game. And it was because single-handedly what Tanje did in that second half.
Yeah, not a ton of help. Blackwell certainly, I think, had a pretty good game as well, but not a ton of help, man. Tanje just put it on his back and said, we're going to the Sweet 16. And he did basically everything he could do to get them to that point. Again, that's almost where, though, I look, and this was the first segment we talked about. If they had a defensive stopper who could maybe initiate offense, like just something to take some of that pressure off of Tanje and slow the other team down, I almost wonder if that would have been a better fit. I don't know, it's impossible to say now, man, but
I think you and I have talked about it all year, and I don't know if Badger fans have got to pay close attention, but imagine Chucky Hepburn on this team.
Oh gosh, I know.
Because then you play a four guard lineup, or Max Klesmit's probably your 6th man of the year. but then you're throwing Chucky out there and you're surrounding him with Tonje and Blackwell. And then, you got Crowell and I mean, holy cow. I mean, just think about it. I mean, it's just, he just brought so much. And I can't forget about those conversations you and I had in the summer when we were breaking down the portal and this and that. And what did we say? Oh, Tonje, nice pickup.
Yeah.
He'll help him. He'll stretch the floor, a 3-and-D guy.
Yeah.
And here we are, he's 1 or 2 percentage points away from being a 50, 40, 90 guy.
Second team All-American. Exactly what we predicted.
Yes. And not only, I am still upset how he is not a first team All-American. It blows my mind that I just think he should have been on the first team. But like you said, just like you and I predicted, we said minimum first team All-American, probably worst case scenario, second team All-American.
I mean, absolutely wild, man. Like we both thought the shooting would translate. Like you could tell the stroke was pure, the numbers were pure. We thought this is a floor spacer. He's going to stretch the court, give you some size. It's all the other stuff, man. The ability to get to the paint, the ability to play in the paint, to draw fouls, to just be consistently aggressive without turning the ball over a ton. It was all those other things that we just didn't see. I don't know if anybody saw it. Because honestly, if anybody saw it, he's not potentially going to New Mexico. He's getting $2 million in the portal to go to Duke. So
absolutely. And and I saw a lot of publications and stuff talked about he was the best transfer portal signing of the offseason. And it's hard to argue. And the reason why it blew my mind that Mark Sears got first team All-American, because I think he got that award based off of last year. If you compare Sears's numbers to Tonje's numbers, especially from an efficiency standpoint, I don't think it's even close. Yeah. So it's nothing to sneeze at that he was a second team All-American, but I honestly believe he should have been a first team All-American.
Coach, man, great stuff as always. Badgers face a super busy offseason. Really important. A lot of pieces to replace, but Greg Gard has done a pretty good job in the portal. Has nailed a lot of his portal guys. So we'll see what happens this offseason. Hopefully Coach will be here for some of that as well as we continue to break down players as they come in on Wisconsin. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will definitely talk to you later.